Centers weighing in on the country's memorandum of understanding with China, the South China Sea. Senate President Tito Sotto believes there's nothing wrong with the plan to jointly explore disputed waters.
It's about time sapagkat hindi naman natin kayang on our own. Hindi natin kaya on our own pero napakatagal na ang panahon yung kabuuan ng Asia. Bakit lahat ng mga kapitbahay nating mga bansa ay mayroong langis? Di ba? Ay imposible naman nung magbato ang Panginoon Diyos ng langis sa Asia, Pilipinas lang iniwasan. Imposible. Kaya tiyak na mayroon. Ngayon, ang problema, hindi natin kayang mag-isa. Kung magkakaroon tayo ng joint exploration, 60-40. 16 Philippines, 40 sa China. Yun yung proposal. At mukha namang acceptable. Kung wala tayo nakikitang masama or huwag tayo nagbibintang na nagbebenta.
Senator Ping Lacson, however, says the MOU is the lowest of its kind. He says there are no details yet. Nothing has been agreed upon except that the two parties' willingness to jointly explore the sea. The visit of Chinese President Xi Jinping highlights a stronger relationship between two countries, both locked in a maritime dispute. Mr. Xi's two-day trip resulted in a number of signed agreements. Our senior correspondent Ina Andalong tells us more.
He's the first Chinese president to hold a state visit in the Philippines in 13 years, a historic visit which clearly shows the renewed ties between the two nations. President Xi Jinping began his visit with a wreath-laying ceremony at the Rizal Monument. Then he met President Duterte in Malacanang. There, the two leaders had an expanded bilateral meeting where Mr. Xi made it clear that being friends is the only way to go for the two countries. Both sides have been dealing with a maritime dispute, an issue which some would say President Duterte has not been assertive enough on.
Good neighborliness, friendship, and win-win cooperation is our only correct choice.
29 deals were signed and exchanged as the two presidents looked on. The agreements include a memorandum of understanding on cooperation on oil and gas development. Details are still scarce as officials have yet to release a copy of this agreement. But Energy Secretary Alfonso Cusi explains it's basically just an agreement to say that both countries are willing to explore oil together and that they are ready to start talks on how this should happen. No identified area yet on what site will be explored.
It is really just a cooperation to find ways or to find a solution. So it is an exploration to explore solution.
Other agreements are on trade and investment, banking and finance, infrastructure, agriculture, culture, and people-to-people exchanges. China vowed to assist in the drug war, import more goods like coconuts and frozen fruits, and also committed to extend 50 scholarship grants to students annually from 2019 to 2022. Filipino English teachers will also be provided work in China. President Xi also donated 10,000 tons of rice to victims of Typhoon Ompong. In their meeting, Mr. Xi says he and President Duterte agreed to elevate the two countries' relationship.
We charted the future course of China-Philippines relations and drew an ambitious blueprint for its development. The President and I both agreed to elevate our relationship into one of comprehensive strategic cooperation.
President Duterte for his part thanked Mr. Xi for backing his push to finally have a code of conduct in the South China Sea.
A lot of work remains, but President Xi's visit gives us new impetus of our mutual efforts to enhance collaboration in ensuring the well-being of our peoples and contributing to peace and stability in the region. I am pleased with the current positive momentum of the Philippines-China relation.
President Xi says he wants to conclude consultations on the COC in 3 years. Ina Andalong, CNN Philippines.
Moving on to another story, the judge in Senator Antonio Trillanes' rebellion case was unaware that government prosecutors had opposed the lawmaker's appeal, which is why he didn't rule on whether or not to dismiss the case. The prosecution was supposed to present more evidence today against the center, but Judge Elmo Alameda deferred this.
The hearing for the presentation of evidence has been cancelled. And the Honorable Court said that he will first resolve the motion before setting the case for hearing again, if necessary.
The center is also asking the court for permission to travel abroad. He hopes to be in Europe from December 11th to January 12th and in the United States from January 27th to February 10th to attend meetings and conventions. We appreciate all your online comments on our top stories tonight. Keep them coming to our pages at CNN Philippines. We're also live right now on Facebook. Justice finally being served over a year since the end of the Marawi siege. And yet again, the United States flies bombers near contested islands in the South China Sea. This is Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines. As Chinese President Xi Jinping wraps up his two-day state visit to the country, confusion over who has a copy of the Memorandum of Understanding on a joint oil and gas exploration with China. Yesterday in Malacanang, Foreign Secretary Teddy Boy Locsin and his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi exchanged copies of what the palace said was one of the 29 signed bilateral agreements and documents to prepare for negotiations of the Philippines and China's joint exploration for oil and gas. It is not clear if the MOU specifies the area to be covered, but an earlier draft said it is in the South China Sea. President Duterte and Mr. Xi witnessed the exchange of the MOU. Malacanang would not confirm until the very last minute that there was such a document. The Foreign Affairs Department, through its spokesperson, said it did not have a copy and told CNN Philippines to ask for one from the Energy Department. An inquiry with Energy Undersecretary Wimpy Fuentebella led not just to a dead end, but to even more confusion as well. Fuentebella told CNN Philippines to request a copy from the Foreign Affairs Department. There was not only confusion about the copy, but also as to which country drafted the document. Yesterday, presidential spokesperson Sal Panelo said it didn't matter whether Manila or Beijing was the author, but Locsin fired back in a very angry tweet. He said he cares about the author of the agreement. He said, quote, "A framework or architecture for gas and oil in our part of the sea demands the draft be mine."
It doesn't matter who drafted it, as far as we're concerned. If you give us a draft, then we'll go over it. We have to see whether this is legal or not. Even if China drafts it, it has to go over us. We have to review that.
Government cannot simply say that we will jointly explore a territory. In this case, why do we need to jointly explore a territory that is ours?
Yeah.
What is within the powers of our own government is to subcontract or service contract the exploration of our resources.
Yeah.
So these are big steps that lawyers can look at, but will be challenging if we will use the word joint exploration.
Challenging meaning this can be brought to the Supreme Court.
Well, not only that, you know, the idea of treason, the idea of giving up something to another country, because China will not do that on their own territory.
What are you saying when you mention the word treason? What are you saying?
Remember, there was this joint maritime seismic agreement in 2007, 2008, whereby there were cases that was filed against then President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo on this issue. So we have to learn those lessons. At the times, we cannot overstep what the power authority that's being given as head of government or head of state of the Philippines.
Responding to requests for documents and information, Panelo, in a statement, appealed to the media for understanding. He says the Foreign Affairs Department is still preoccupied with activities for the Chinese president's visit. Panelo adds the government will release all documents as soon as they are certified and available. For a year since the Battle of Marawi ended, a court hands down the first convictions in connection with the siege. Our George Giles tells us how the court ruled and who are still facing charges.
Guilty. That's the verdict of a Taguig City court on a terrorism case against Nur Supyan, a recruiter of multi-ISIS group. Supyan was arrested in July 2017 together with his recruits in Zamboanga, Sibugay. His recruits claimed Supyan promised to bring them to Camp Jabal Nur in Sulu to train as members of the Moro National Liberation Front and eventually be integrated into the country's armed forces. But the military officer who infiltrated the group testified Supyan supported Maute fighters in Marawi. His sentence, 40 years imprisonment without benefit of parole. While Supyan was found guilty, his co-accused Marvin Ahmad, Salip Ismael Abdullah and Isa Ukang were acquitted. The court says the three were innocent as they were in the area by coincidence. The same court also sentenced Maute Group fighters Araji Samindi and Umad Harun 8 to 14 years of imprisonment for rebellion. Military officers positively identified Araji and Harun while engaging troops in the main battle area of Marawi on June 12, 2017. Meanwhile, Mona Lisa Ramato and Tahera Tahera were also acquitted for the rebellion case filed against them. Both women were arrested in a house in Cagayan de Oro City in July 2017, where explosives were recovered. The court says the prosecution failed to establish that the women owned the explosives and they actually reside in the house where the explosives were recovered.
Ang Marawi siege naman, it has to go through different levels of resolution. No? Number one is you go after those responsible or a party to what happened. And we need to make sure that these people who are responsible for all the destruction that had happened in Marawi City should really serve terms in jail, no? Should really put into behind bars. So it's a positive development towards yung sinasabi nating social healing.
Multi-matriarch Farhana is still facing a rebellion case and currently detained in a facility in Taguig City. Minhati Maute, wife of Maute Group leader Omar, is facing cases of illegal possession of explosives and detained at the Iligan City Jail. George Cahiles, CNN Philippines.